A millionaire finds a beggar girl at his mother's tomb, who says, "Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb Grandma." He was shocked, but replied, "You've got the wrong tomb, little girl." What the little girl then says to the man completely changed his life. Watch to the end to see the outcome of this beautiful story. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The Crisp. Autumn wind swept through the empty cemetery, carrying dried leaves and the damp scent of freshly turned earth. Alexander Stone, CEO of Stone Enterprises, pulled his cashmere coat tighter around his shoulders as he approached his mother's gravestone. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and purple, matching the melancholy that had become his annual companion on this particular day. For 15 years he had maintained this solemn ritual. Every year on the anniversary of his mother's passing, he would visit her grave, carrying the weight of unspoken guilt and regrets. The marble headstone stood as a silent witness to his transformation from a young idealist into one of the most powerful business figures in the country. But today was different. As he approached the familiar spot, he noticed a small figure huddled near his mother's grave. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, knelt before the headstone. Her clothes were worn and dirty, her wool cap frayed at the edges. In her small hands, she clutched a half-eaten piece of bread, her body trembling either from the cold or uncertainty. Alexander stopped in his tracks, his polished leather shoes crunching on the gravel path. The sound caught the girl's attention, and she lifted her head, revealing large, tired eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her years. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "I didn't mean to disturb Grandma." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He felt his knees weaken, and his usually composed demeanor cracked. "You must be mistaken," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. "This isn't your grandmother's grave." The girl didn't move. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her threadbare jacket and pulled out a worn photograph. Even from where he stood, Alexander could recognize the image, one he thought had been lost to time. It showed a younger version of himself with Isabella, the woman he had loved and lost over 8 years ago. "Mommy said this was you," the girl continued, her small fingers tracing the edges of the photograph. "She said you never wanted to know about us." Alexander's world tilted on its axis. The carefully constructed walls of his life began to crumble as memories he had buried deep within his consciousness surged forward. Isabella's sudden disappearance, the unanswered messages, the phone calls that never connected. Everything he thought he knew was being challenged by this small figure before him. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the tremors running through his body. "Sophie," she replied, tucking the photograph back into her pocket. "Sophie Martinez Stone." The hyphenated surname struck him like lightning. In that moment, standing among the graves and autumn leaves, Alexander realized that his life's narrative had been built on a foundation of lies. This child, this small, brave girl who had sought out her grandmother's grave, was his daughter. He took a tentative step forward, then another until he stood beside Sophie. The resemblance was undeniable now that he looked closely. She had his mother's eyes and Isabella's determined chin. How had he not known? How had he missed 8 years of his daughter's life? "Where is your mother?" he asked, dreading the answer but needing to know. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back stubbornly. "In the hospital. She's very sick and she sent me to find you." She paused, gathering courage before continuing. "She said it was time for you to know the truth." The wind picked up, scattering more leaves around them. Alexander looked at his mother's grave, then back at the child who had appeared like a ghost from his past. In the gathering dusk, he made a decision that would forever change the course of both their lives. "Come with me," he said softly, extending his hand. "Shall we have a lot to talk about?" Sophie hesitated, looking at his outstretched hand with a mixture of hope and fear. The piece of bread in her hand crumbled slightly, and Alexander noticed how thin her wrists were, how her clothes hung loosely on her small frame. "I promise," he added, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere this time." The drive to St. Mary's Hospital was filled with a heavy silence. Alexander's mind raced as he navigated the evening traffic, occasionally glancing at Sophie through the rearview mirror. She sat quietly in the back seat of his luxury sedan, her small hands folded in her lap, staring out the window at the city lights with wonder in her eyes. Every street lamp they passed illuminated another detail he hadn't noticed before. The slight curl in her hair that matched Isabella's, the way she furrowed her brow in concentration just like he did. Each similarity was a knife twisting in his gut, a reminder of everything he had missed. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty when they arrived. Sophie led the way with surprising confidence, navigating the sterile corridors until they reached room 507. She paused at the door, turning to Alexander with an unexpectedly mature expression. "Mommy's very tired today," she whispered. "Sometimes she forgets things, but the doctors say it's because of the medicine." Alexander nodded, unable to speak. Through the small window in the door, he could see Isabella lying in the hospital bed, her once vibrant presence diminished by illness. The sight of her, even in this state, brought back a flood of memories. Their first meeting at a charity gala, quiet evenings spent planning their future, the last time he saw her when she promised to return from her trip to Mexico. She never did, or so he had thought. Sophie pushed the door open and Isabella's eyes fluttered open at the sound. When she saw Alexander standing in the doorway, her face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: surprise, fear, relief, and finally, a deep sadness. "You came," she whispered, her voice weak, but still carrying the melodic accent he remembered. "I wasn't sure if Sophie would find you." Alexander moved closer to the bed, his legs feeling like lead. "Isabella? What happened?" "All these years, I thought. You thought I abandoned you," she finished, reaching for Sophie, who had climbed onto the edge of the bed. "Just like I thought you had rejected us when you learned about the baby." The pieces began falling into place, forming a picture that made Alexander's blood run cold. "Someone intercepted our communications," he said, the realization dawning on him. "Someone made sure we couldn't reach each other." Isabella nodded weakly, running her fingers through Sophie's hair. "Your father's assistant came to see me in Mexico. She said you knew about the pregnancy and wanted nothing to do with us. She showed me emails, texts, all from you, saying how a child would ruin your career, your reputation." "I never wrote those," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "I never knew about Sophie. I looked for you everywhere, hired private investigators. They all came back saying you had vanished without a trace." Sophie looked between her parents, her young mind trying to process the weight of their words. "Is that why you never came to my birthdays?" she asked Alexander, her voice small but steady. The question struck him like a physical blow. 8 birthdays he had missed. 8 years of his daughter's life gone forever because of someone's deliberate manipulation. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, reaching out to touch Sophie's hand. This time she didn't pull away. "If I had known—" "It wasn't just the assistant," Isabella interrupted, her breath becoming labored. "There was someone else, someone with power who wanted to keep us apart. But my time is running out, Alexander, and Sophie needs her father." The monitors beside Isabella's bed beeped steadily, a reminder of the urgency of their situation. Alexander pulled a chair closer to the bed, sitting down beside the 2 people who should have been his family all along. "Tell me everything," he said, taking Isabella's free hand in his, "from the beginning." As Isabella began to speak, Alexander felt the foundations of his world shift once again. The truth, he would soon learn, was far more complex and devastating than he could have imagined. And somewhere in the city, in a high-rise office, the architect of their separation was about to discover that their carefully constructed house of lies was finally beginning to crumble. Isabella's revelations came slowly, each word seeming to drain more of her strength. The hospital room felt smaller as the weight of truth pressed in on them. Alexander sat perfectly still, his hand still holding hers, as the story of their separation unfolded like a tragic novel. "Your father's assistant wasn't working alone," Isabella explained, her voice barely above a whisper. She was following orders from Gerald Stone himself. Your father orchestrated everything, Alexander. He saw our relationship as a threat to his legacy, to the empire he had built. The words hit Alexander like physical blows. His father, the man who had shaped him into the business titan he was today, had systematically destroyed the only real chance at happiness he'd ever had. The realization made him feel hollow inside. But why? He asked, his voice hoarse. Why go to such lengths? Isabella's eyes drifted to Sophie, who had fallen asleep curled up in a chair nearby, her small frame rising and falling with each breath. Because of what happened to him, she said, your father's own tragic love story, the one he never told you about. Alexander frowned, leaning forward. What are you talking about? Before he married your mother, there was someone else, a woman from a humble background like me. They had a child together, but his family intervened. They separated them just like they separated us. Isabella paused, struggling to catch her breath. History repeated itself, Alexander. Your father became what he hated most. The revelation sent Alexander's mind spinning. His father had always been a stern, unyielding man, but this level of manipulation seemed beyond even him. Yet as he thought back to his childhood, certain things began to make sense. The way his father never spoke of his past, the strange sadness that would sometimes cross his face when he thought no one was watching. How did you discover all this? Alexander asked, his business mind automatically seeking verification. Isabella reached weakly for her bedside table, gesturing to a small leather-bound journal. Your mother knew. She wrote everything down before she became ill. The journal found its way to me through an old family friend who knew the truth. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you, but my condition... She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Alexander picked up the journal with trembling hands. Inside, he recognized his mother's elegant handwriting, page after page filled with the truth he had never known. The story of a family torn apart by pride and prejudice, of a cycle of pain that had spanned generations. Your father isn't just your enemy in this, Alexander, Isabella continued. He's also a victim of his own past. But Sophie... She looked at their sleeping daughter. Sophie deserves better than to be another casualty of this family's legacy of separation. The monitors beeped steadily in the background as Alexander absorbed this information. He thought of his father, sitting in his penthouse office, probably believing he had protected his son from making the same mistakes he had made. The irony was bitter and sharp. There's more, Isabella said, her voice growing weaker. The tumor, it's spreading faster than the doctors expected. I don't have much time left, Alexander. I need to know that Sophie will be taken care of, that she'll be loved. Alexander felt his throat tighten. Of course she will. She's my daughter. I'll give her everything she needs. Isabella managed a weak smile. She doesn't need everything. Alexander, she just needs you, your time, your love, your presence. Don't make the mistake of thinking wealth can replace what she really needs. As if on cue, Sophie stirred in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent. Alexander watched her, really seeing her for the first time, not just as a surprise from his past, but as a small, vulnerable human being who needed him. I don't know how to be a father, he admitted quietly. I never had a good example to follow. None of us know at first, Isabella replied. We learn, we grow, we make mistakes and we try again. That's what love is, Alexander. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. The night deepened outside the hospital windows, but inside room 507, time seemed to stand still. Alexander sat there, holding Isabella's hand, watching their daughter sleep and feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He had built empires, closed billion-dollar deals, and shaped the business world to his will. But none of that had prepared him for this moment. He needed to become something he had never been before, a father. And he needed to confront the man who had orchestrated their separation, his own father. The thought of that confrontation made his stomach churn, but he knew it was necessary. I'll make this right, he promised, more to himself than to Isabella. For all of us. Isabella squeezed his hand weakly. Just love her, Alexander. That's all I ask. Love her enough for both of us. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and urgency. Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, unaware of the drama unfolding within the hospital walls, unaware that a family's fate was being reshaped in the quiet hours of the night. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander's penthouse apartment, casting long shadows across the pristine hardwood floors. Sophie stood in the center of the vast living room, her small backpack clutched to her chest like a shield, her eyes wide as she took in the luxury surrounding her. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly in the spacious room. Alexander nodded, suddenly seeing his home through new eyes. The modern art pieces that had cost millions now seemed cold and impersonal. The designer furniture, chosen for its aesthetic appeal rather than comfort, looked uninviting. This was a showcase, not a home, certainly not a place for a child. "Your room is this way," he said, leading her down the hallway to the guest room he had hastily prepared the night before. "We can decorate it however you like." Sophie followed him silently, her footsteps barely making a sound on the polished floor. The guest room was elegant, but austere, with its cream-colored walls and minimal furnishings. Alexander made a mental note to hire an interior designer who specialized in children's rooms. "I have my own bed at home," Sophie said quietly, placing her backpack on the king-sized bed. "It has stars on the blanket." The simple statement made Alexander's heart clench. Of course she had her own bed, her own room, her own life. A life he knew nothing about. "We can get stars for this bed too," he offered. "Any kind you want." Before Sophie could respond, Alexander's phone buzzed. It was a message from his executive assistant. "Emergency board meeting called by your father. Attendance mandatory. 9 a.m. Alexander checked his watch. 8:15 a.m. His father's timing couldn't have been worse, but perhaps it wasn't coincidental. News traveled fast in their circles, and Gerald Stone had eyes everywhere. "Sophie," he said, kneeling down to her. "Level. I have an important meeting I need to attend. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will stay with you. She's very kind and she makes excellent pancakes." As if on cue, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. She was a petite woman in her 60s who had worked for Alexander for the past decade, managing his household with quiet efficiency. Her eyes softened when she saw Sophie. "Hello, little one," she said warmly. "Would you like some breakfast?" Sophie looked at Alexander uncertainly. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice small but direct. The question carried the weight of their shared history, of absence and abandonment, whether intentional or not. Alexander felt its impact like a physical blow. "I promise," he said firmly. "I'll be back as soon as I can. We can have lunch together." Sophie seemed to consider this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but no more promises you can't keep." The maturity in her voice startled him. This 8-year-old child had already learned hard lessons about trust and disappointment. Alexander stood up, straightening his tie. "I'll keep this one," he said. "You have my word." As he walked toward the elevator, he heard Mrs. Chen beginning to chat with Sophie about pancake toppings. The normalcy of the conversation made the abnormality of the situation even more apparent. The drive to Stone Enterprises headquarters was tense. Alexander's mind raced between thoughts of Sophie, Isabella in her hospital bed, and the confrontation that awaited him. The journal his mother had written sat heavy in his briefcase, its revelations burning in his mind. The massive glass and steel building that housed Stone Enterprises rose before him, its architecture designed to intimidate and impress. Alexander had always felt a sense of pride when approaching it, but today it felt like entering a battleground. In the executive elevator, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from the hospital. Isabella's condition had stabilized overnight, but the doctors wanted to speak with him about long-term care options. Time was becoming an increasingly precious commodity. The elevator doors opened directly into the boardroom antechamber. Through the glass walls, Alexander could see his father standing at the head of the table, commanding the room as he always had. Gerald Stone was in his 70s but looked a decade younger, his silver hair perfectly styled, his posture military straight. For a moment, Alexander saw him differently, not as the powerful patriarch he had always known, but as a man who had made the same choices he was facing now. A man who had chosen family legacy over love and had lived with that decision for decades. "Mr. Stone," his assistant greeted him nervously. "They're waiting for you." Alexander straightened his shoulders and reached for the door handle. It was time to confront not just his father, but the legacy of lies that had shaped their family for generations. Behind him, the elevator doors closed with a soft chime, while somewhere across the city a little girl was waiting to see if he would keep his promise. The boardroom fell silent as Alexander entered, all eyes turning to watch the impending confrontation between father and son. Gerald Stone stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he watched his son take his seat. "Now that we're all here," Gerald began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command, "let's address the situation that threatens the stability of Stone Enterprises." Alexander felt his jaw tighten. Of course, his father would frame this as a business crisis rather than a family matter. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, already sensing the tension. "I've received concerning reports," Gerald continued, pulling up a presentation on the large screen behind him. "Reports of a potential scandal that could affect our stock prices and ongoing negotiations with the Asian markets." The screen displayed surveillance photos. Alexander at the cemetery with Sophie, entering the hospital, leaving with the child. Each image was time-stamped, proving that Gerald's intelligence network was as efficient as ever. "If you're planning to discuss my daughter," Alexander said, his voice cutting through the room like steel, "I suggest we clear the room first. This is a family matter." Gerald's expression hardened. "Everything that affects Stone Enterprises is a board matter. You of all people should understand that, Alexander. I've spent decades building this company's reputation. Like you spent decades building walls between people who loved each other?" Alexander pulled his mother's journal from his briefcase, placing it on the polished mahogany table. "Should we discuss your own history with family matters, father?" Bertestin. Color drained from Gerald's face as he recognized the journal. The board members exchanged confused glances, sensing they were witnessing something beyond their understanding. "That's enough," Gerald snapped, but his voice had lost some of its authority. "Everyone out, now." The board members couldn't leave. Fast enough, files and tablets clutched to their chests as they hurried from the room. When the last person had gone, Gerald slowly sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. "Where did you get that?" he asked, eyes fixed on the journal. "From Isabella. Mother gave it to her through an old friend before she passed away." Alexander opened the journal to a marked page. "She knew everything, father. About Maria, about your son, about how your family separated you from them." Gerald's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the journal. "That was a different time," he said softly. "Different circumstances. Was it? Or did you just tell yourself that when you decided to do the same thing to me?" Alexander leaned forward. "Did it make you feel better about destroying my family when you convinced yourself you were protecting me?" "I was protecting the company." Gerald's fist slammed onto the table. "Everything I've done has been to protect what we've built." "No," Alexander said, his voice deadly calm. "Everything you've done has been to justify your own past choices. You couldn't bear to see me happy with someone from a lower station because it reminded you of your own loss. So you orchestrated our separation, just like your family did to you." Gerald stood abruptly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "You don't understand the responsibilities that come with this position, the sacrifices required." "I understand perfectly," Alexander interrupted. "I understand that you've spent your entire life trying to convince yourself that choosing money over love was the right decision. And when you saw me making the choice you couldn't, you made sure I didn't have the chance." The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unspoken pain. Outside, the city continued its bustling pace, unaware of the drama unfolding in the tower above. "Where is he?" Alexander asked quietly. "Your other son, my brother." Gerald's shoulders stiffened. "I don't know. I tried to find them years later, but He turned, and Alexander was shocked to see tears in his father's eyes. Maria had changed their names, disappeared completely, just like Isabella did with Sophie. "Except Isabella didn't disappear by choice," Alexander said. "You forced her away. You had your assistant show her fake messages, convince her I wanted nothing to do with her or our child. You robbed me of 8 years with my daughter." "To protect you from making my mistakes," Gerald's voice cracked. "To save you from the pain I've lived with every day of my life." Alexander stood, gathering the journal and his belongings. "The only mistake here was thinking that love could ever be a weakness. Sophie needs her father, and I won't let your past trauma destroy her future. I'm going to be there for my daughter, regardless of what it means for Stone Enterprises." He walked to the door, then paused. "And Father, I forgive you, not for my sake, but for Sophie's. She deserves to know her grandfather, the real man, not the corporate titan. It's time to break this cycle of pain." As Alexander left the boardroom, he felt lighter somehow. His phone buzzed, a message from Mrs. Chen with a photo of Sophie, helping to make pancakes, her small face covered in flour, but smiling. He smiled back at the image, knowing he had made the right choice. The war wasn't over. There would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face. But for the first time in his life, Alexander Stone knew exactly what he was fighting. For Alexander returned to his penthouse to find the kitchen in cheerful disarray. Flour dusted every surface, and the air was rich with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. Sophie sat at the breakfast bar, carefully arranging blueberries into a smiley face on her stack of pancakes, while Mrs. Chen cleaned up around her. "You came back," Sophie said, looking up as he entered. There was surprise in her voice, despite his promise. "Of course I did." Alexander loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. "Those pancakes look delicious. Room for one more at the breakfast bar?" Sophie nodded, pushing a clean plate toward him. Mrs. Chen quietly excused herself, leaving father and daughter alone together for the first time since their meeting at the cemetery. "Mrs. Chen taught me how to flip them," Sophie said, watching, as Alexander served himself. "I only dropped 2 on the floor." "That's better than I would do," Alexander admitted, realizing he couldn't remember the last time he'd cooked anything. His meals usually came from high-end restaurants or were prepared by his personal chef. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Sophie spoke again. "Did you see your dad? The one who kept us apart?" Alexander nearly choked on his pancake. He hadn't expected such a direct question from an 8-year-old. "Yes," he answered carefully. "We had a long talk about everything that happened." "Did you yell at him?" Sophie's eyes were serious. "Mommy says yelling doesn't solve problems, but sometimes it makes you feel better." A surprised laugh escaped Alexander. "Your mother is very wise. No, I didn't yell. But I did tell him that what he did was wrong, and that things are going to be different now." Sophie nodded, considering this as she chased a blueberry around her plate. "Is he sorry?" "I think he is," Alexander said slowly. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they're scared of getting hurt, or of the people they love getting hurt. It doesn't make it right, but like when I told Jimmy Wilson I didn't want to be his friend anymore because I was scared he'd make fun of my old shoes," Sophie interrupted. Alexander blinked, surprised by her insight. "Yes, something like that. Did you and Jimmy work it out?" "Eventually, I apologized and he said his shoes were old too." Sophie shrugged. "Now we're best friends. Well, we were until—" Her voice trailed off, and Alexander saw tears forming in her eyes. "Until you had to leave your school to come here," he finished gently. Sophie nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. Without thinking, Alexander reached out and wiped it away with his thumb. To his surprise, Sophie didn't pull back. Instead, she leaned slightly into his touch, like a flower turning toward the sun. "I miss my friends," she whispered. "And my teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, and our apartment, even though it was small, and—" Her voice broke. "I miss Mommy being okay." Alexander felt his heart breaking. He had been so caught up in his own emotions, his anger at his father, that he hadn't fully considered how overwhelming all of this must be for Sophie. "What if we visited your old school?" he suggested. "You could say goodbye properly to your friends, maybe get their contact information, And we could talk to Ms. Rodriguez about arranging some video calls? Sophie's eyes lit up. Really? You'd do that? Of course. And maybe... Alexander took a deep breath, knowing he was about to suggest something that would change both their lives forever. Maybe we could look at houses instead of staying in this apartment. Something with a garden and room for a proper bedroom for you. Somewhere that could be our home, not just mine. With stars on my ceiling? Sophie asked hopefully. With entire galaxies if you want them, Alexander promised. We could even paint them ourselves. Sophie giggled at the thought. You'd get paint all over your fancy suit. Then I won't wear a fancy suit, Alexander said, surprising himself with how easy the words came. I'll wear old clothes like when you're doing art projects. You do art projects? Sophie asked skeptically. Well, no, Alexander admitted, but I could learn. We could learn together. The smile that spread across Sophie's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. For a moment, Alexander saw a glimpse of the future. Messy art projects, bedtime stories, school plays, and all the other parts of parenthood he had never expected to experience. Can we visit Mommy after breakfast? Sophie asked, her voice growing serious again. I want to tell her about the pancakes. Of course we can, Alexander said, checking his phone. There were dozens of messages from the office, from board members, from his father. He ignored them all and opened his calendar app instead. In fact, why don't we make a schedule? Every morning we can have breakfast together, then visit your mother, and in the afternoons. Ice cream, Sophie suggested hopefully. Alexander laughed. Sometimes, but also school and homework and all the normal things. We'll figure it out together, okay? Sophie nodded, then did something that made Alexander's heart stop. She reached out and took his hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his, trusting and warm. Okay, she said simply. Together. The real estate agent's heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she led Alexander and Sophie through yet another potential home. This was the 5th house they'd viewed that week, and while each one had been impressive, none had felt quite right. This property features 6 bedrooms, a state-of-the-art security system, and a heated indoor pool, the agent explained, her voice echoing through the vast, empty spaces. Sophie wandered ahead, her footsteps silent in comparison. She paused at a large window overlooking the backyard, pressing her small hand against the glass. Alexander watched her, noting how tiny she looked in the enormous house. What do you think, Sophie? He asked, coming to stand beside her. She turned to look up at him, her expression serious. It's too big, she said simply. Like your apartment, everything echoes. The real estate agent's smile faltered slightly. This was, after all, one of the most exclusive properties in the area, but Alexander found himself nodding in agreement. You're right, he said. It doesn't feel like a home. As they left the property, Alexander's phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Isabella's condition had worsened overnight, and the doctors wanted to discuss treatment options. His stomach clenched with worry. Sophie, he said gently, we need to make a stop at the hospital before we look at any more houses. The doctors want to talk to me about your mother. Sophie's face clouded over, but she nodded bravely. Can I bring her the drawing I made yesterday? Of course. The drive to the hospital was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The drawing Sophie had made, a bright, hopeful picture of 3 people holding hands under a starry sky, lay carefully protected in her lap. As they approached Isabella's room, they heard voices inside. One of them belonged to Gerald Stone. Alexander stopped short, instinctively putting a protective hand on Sophie's shoulder. Through the door's window, he could see his father sitting beside Isabella's bed, his usual commanding presence softened by something that looked like regret. I never meant for it to go this far, Gerald was saying, his voice carrying through the partially open door. I thought I was protecting my son, but I was just repeating the mistakes of the past. Isabella's response was weak but clear. We can't change what happened, Mr. Stone, but we can choose what happens next. For Sophie's sake, is that, Sophie whispered, looking up at Alexander, my grandfather? Alexander nodded, surprised by the lack of anger he felt at seeing his father there. Perhaps Isabella's capacity for forgiveness was teaching them all something about healing. "Should we go in?" he asked Sophie. She clutched her drawing tighter but nodded. "Mommy always says we should give people a chance to say sorry." They entered the room quietly. Gerald looked up, startled, then quickly stood. For a moment, the powerful CEO of Stone Enterprises looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "Hello, Sophie," he said softly. "I'm your grandfather, though I haven't earned the right to be called that yet." Sophie studied him with the direct, unfiltered gaze of a child. "Did you keep my daddy away because you were scared?" The question, so innocent yet so piercing, seemed to strike Gerald like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, looking older than Alexander had ever seen him. "Yes," he admitted. "I was scared of history repeating itself, of seeing your father hurt the way I was hurt, but in trying to prevent that pain I caused so much more." Sophie walked over to Isabella's bed, carefully showing her the drawing. "Look, Mommy, I drew us under the stars and I left space." She glanced at Gerald, then back at her mother. "I left space for more people, if they want to be family too." Isabella's tired face lit up with a smile as she looked at the drawing. "It's beautiful, mi amor, just like your heart." Alexander watched as his father leaned forward to look at the drawing, saw how his hands trembled slightly as Sophie explained. Each detail. The stars she'd drawn were uneven, the stick figures disproportionate, but somehow it captured everything that mattered: hope, love, and the possibility of healing. "I have a house to show you," Gerald said suddenly, looking at Alexander. "Not one of those soulless mansions the real estate agent has been pushing. It's where your mother and I lived when you were small, before success changed. Everything. It's been sitting empty since she left us, but maybe it's time for new memories to be made there." Alexander remembered the house vaguely, a comfortable colonial with a wraparound porch and a big oak tree in the backyard. He had been happy there before the family moved to the penthouse, before everything became about image and success. "Does it have a garden?" Sophie asked, her eyes bright with interest. "The best garden in the neighborhood," Gerald replied, a genuine smile softening his features. "Your grandmother used to grow roses there, and there's a perfect spot for a treehouse in that old oak tree." Isabella reached out and took Alexander's hand. "Life has a way of coming full circle," she whispered. "Sometimes we have to revisit the past to find our way forward." Looking around the hospital room, at this unlikely gathering of broken people, trying to become whole again, Alexander felt something shift inside him. Perhaps healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about learning from it, about choosing love over fear, family over legacy, and the messy beauty of real relationships over the cold perfection of success. The old stone family home stood before them, its white clapboard siding glowing in the late afternoon sun. The wraparound porch still held the same wooden swing, where Alexander remembered his mother reading to him on summer evenings. The massive oak tree's branches spread wide over the yard, its leaves casting dancing shadows on the lawn. "It's like a fairy tale house," Sophie breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Alexander had to agree. After the sleek modernity of his penthouse and the ostentatious mansions they'd been viewing, there was something magical about this place. It felt lived in, loved, ready for new stories to unfold within its walls. Gerald stepped onto the porch, his hand shaking slightly as he inserted the key into the lock. "Nobody's been here for years except the maintenance crew," he explained. "Your mother wanted to keep it exactly as it was." The door swung open with a familiar creak, and the scent of lemon polish and old wood wrapped around them like a welcome. Sophie slipped her hand into Alexander's as they stepped inside. The foyer opened into a warm living room with built-in bookshelves and a stone fireplace. Afternoon light streamed through the bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Family photographs still lined the mantel, frozen moments of a happier time. "Look, Daddy," Sophie called out, pointing to a photo of a small boy with unruly dark hair. "Is that you?" Alexander picked up the frame, smiling at the image of his younger self. He was sitting on these very steps, clutching a toy airplane, his face split with a gap-toothed grin. "Yes, that's me. I must have been about your age." "You look happy," Sophie observed, studying the photograph. "I was," Alexander replied softly. "This house, it was home." They continued their tour, footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The kitchen was spacious but cozy, with a breakfast nook surrounded by windows that looked out over the garden. Upstairs, they found 4 bedrooms, including one that had been Alexander's childhood room. "This one," Sophie declared, standing in the doorway of a room with a large window seat. "Can this be my room?" The room faced east, perfect for watching the sunrise. The window seat was cushioned and deep enough to curl up with a book. Above it, a skylight offered a perfect view of the stars at night. "Of course," Alexander said. "We can paint it any color you want." "Purple," Sophie said decisively. "Light purple, like the flowers in the garden." Gerald, who had been quietly following them, cleared his throat. "Your grandmother's favorite flowers were lilacs. She would have loved that choice." Sophie turned to her grandfather, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Will you help us plant more lilacs? Mommy says gardens need lots of love to grow properly." The question seemed to catch Gerald off guard. He blinked rapidly, and Alexander realized with surprise that his father was fighting back tears. "I would be honored," Gerald said finally. "I haven't gardened since your grandmother was here, but I remember everything she taught me." Alexander watched this exchange with a mixture of hope and caution. His father was trying, that much was clear, but trust, like gardens, needed time and care to grow. "We should get back to the hospital," Alexander said gently. "Isabella will want to hear all about the house." Sophie nodded, but paused at the front door, looking back at the sunlit foyer. "Can we come back tomorrow?" "Actually," Gerald interjected, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket, "I had my lawyers draw up the papers this morning. The house is yours, Alexander, yours and Sophie's. It should have been yours all along." Alexander stared at the envelope, understanding the magnitude of what his father was offering. It wasn't just a house. It was an acknowledgement of past wrongs, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. "Thank you," he said simply, accepting the envelope. As they walked back to the car, Sophie skipping ahead to examine a butterfly in the garden, Gerald touched Alexander's arm. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about my other son, your brother. I've hired new investigators, better ones. Maybe it's not too late to heal that wound too." Alexander looked at his father, seeing not the intimidating businessman he'd grown up trying to please, but a man who had carried his own pain for far too long. "One step at a time," Alexander said. "Right now, let's focus on the family we have here, on making new memories in this house, on giving Sophie the childhood she deserves." Sophie called out to them from the garden, her face glowing with excitement. "Look, there are baby lilacs growing under the big bushes. They're fighting their way up through the grass." Both men turned to watch her, this small miracle who had brought them all together. Like those determined lilacs, love had found a way to push through the barriers of pride and fear, reaching for the light. "Life finds a way," Gerald murmured, echoing Alexander's thoughts, "even in the most unexpected places." As they drove back to the hospital, Sophie chattering excitedly about paint colors and treehouse designs, Alexander caught glimpses of the house in his rearview mirror. It seemed to glow in the late afternoon light, a beacon of hope and new beginnings. Sometimes he realized the way forward could only be found by going back to where the heart first learned to love, back to where family meant more than fortune, back to the place where healing could finally begin. The autumn breeze rustled through the oak tree's branches as Alexander watched Sophie and Gerald work in the garden. His father, dressed in clothes that would have been unthinkable in the corporate boardroom, worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, was showing Sophie how to properly plant lilac bushes. "How you have to give them room to grow," Gerald explained, his hands covered in rich soil. "Too close together and they'll struggle for sunlight and nutrients." Sophie nodded seriously, her small gardening gloves almost too big for her hands. "Like people," she said, "we need room to grow too." Alexander smiled at her insight. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of change. The old stone house was slowly coming back to life, filled with the sounds of renovation and renewal. Sophie's room was now a soft shade of lilac, with glow-in-the-dark stars carefully arranged on the ceiling in actual constellations. A project that had taken an entire weekend and resulted in more than a few misplaced stars. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Marcus Chen, his CFO and longest-serving executive. "Alexander," Marcus's voice was hesitant. "The board is getting nervous. Your father's sudden step back from daily operations, your reduced hours. There are rumors of a hostile takeover attempt brewing." Alexander watched as his father showed Sophie how to pat down the soil around a newly planted bush. The corporate world seemed very far away from this peaceful garden. "Let them be nervous," he replied. "Sometimes change is necessary for growth. Schedule a board meeting for Monday. It's time for some restructuring." After ending the call, Alexander joined his father and daughter in the garden. Sophie immediately handed him a trowel. "You have to help, Daddy," she insisted. "Grandpa says gardens are family projects." The word grandpa still felt new on Sophie's tongue, but it came more naturally each day. Gerald's eyes softened every time he heard it, though he tried to hide his emotion behind his usual gruff exterior. "Your grandmother would have loved this," Gerald said quietly, watching Sophie arrange small stones around the base of a lilac bush. "She always said gardens were living stories, each plant representing a different chapter, growing and changing with the seasons." "Then we should plant something for Mommy too," Sophie said, her voice taking on that careful tone she used when speaking about Isabella. "Something strong that keeps blooming even when things are hard." Alexander felt his throat tighten. Isabella's condition had stabilized somewhat with the new treatment protocol, but the doctors remained cautiously pessimistic about long-term recovery. Every day was a gift, each moment precious. "Roses," Gerald suggested. "Your grandmother had a special variety she loved. Peace roses. They bloom through multiple seasons, and even when winter comes, they don't give up. They just rest and gather strength for the next blooming." Sophie's face lit up. "Can we get some and plant them where Mommy can see them from her window?" They had arranged for Isabella to be transferred to a private medical facility closer to the house with a room overlooking the garden. The move was scheduled for the following week, assuming her condition remained stable. "Of course we can," Alexander said. "In fact, I think the garden center is still open. We could go now." As they cleaned up their tools and prepared to leave, Gerald pulled Alexander aside. "The investigators found something," he said in a low voice, "about Maria and your brother. They're in Arizona. He's a teacher at a community college there." Alexander absorbed this information, watching Sophie skip ahead to the car. "Have you made contact?" Gerald shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first. We've made so much progress here with Sophie and Isabella. I don't want to disrupt that by rushing into another family reunion." "Or maybe," Alexander suggested gently, "you're scared of being rejected. Of finding out that some broken things can't be fixed." His father's silence was answer enough. "But look at us," Alexander continued, gesturing to the garden they'd spent the day working in together. "A month ago, I wouldn't have believed this was possible. Sometimes the hardest step is just reaching out." Gerald looked at his soil-covered hands, then at Sophie waiting impatiently by the car. Maybe we could write a letter first, together, as a family." Alexander nodded, understanding the significance of the suggestion. His father wasn't just trying to reconnect with his lost son, he was trying to do it differently this time, with support and openness instead of control and secrets. "Sophie," Gerald called out, "before we go to the garden center, how would you feel about helping us write a very important letter?" Sophie bounced back to them, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What kind of letter?" "A letter to someone who's been missing from our family for a very long time," Alexander explained. "Someone who might be ready to come home." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden as they headed inside. The newly planted lilacs stood proud in their fresh soil, their leaves catching the golden light. In time, they would grow strong and bloom, just like the family that planted them. And somewhere in Arizona, a man who didn't yet know he was part of this story was about to receive an invitation to join in its next chapter. The study in the old stone house had become their gathering place for important family moments. Tonight, the antique desk lamp cast a warm glow over 3 generations as they sat together, trying to find the right words to bridge a 40-year gap. "Dear Michael," Sophie read aloud from her carefully printed contribution to the letter. "My name is Sophie, and I just found out you're my uncle. I'm 8 years old, and I like purple flowers and stars. Did you know our grandma loved gardens, too?" Alexander watched his daughter's earnest expression as she shared her words. Sometimes the simplest truths came from children's hearts. "It's perfect," Gerald said softly, his own draft of the letter crumpled and discarded beside him. He had started and stopped dozens of times, decades of regret making each word feel inadequate. "Sophie's right," Alexander said. "We should start with truth and simplicity. No corporate speak, no complicated explanations, just family reaching out to family." Gerald nodded, picking up a pen with slightly trembling fingers. Together, they crafted a letter that was part apology, part invitation, and part new beginning. They told the story of recent events, of Sophie's appearance at the cemetery, of Alexander discovering the truth, of a family learning to heal old wounds. As they worked, Isabella's nurse called with the evening update. She was having a good day, feeling strong enough to sit up and look through some old photo albums that Alexander had found in the attic. "Can we visit Mommy after we finish the letter?" Sophie asked, adding a small drawing of lilacs to the margin of the page. "Of course," Alexander promised. "She'll want to hear all about our gardening adventure today." Gerald stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden now silvered by moonlight. "I keep thinking about Maria," he said quietly. "All these years I convinced myself that staying away was the right thing to do, that success and status were worth the sacrifice. But seeing you with Sophie, Alexander, I understand now what I really lost." "It's not too late," Alexander said, joining his father at the window. "Look how much has changed in just a few weeks. The garden that was overgrown is blooming again. This house that was empty is full of life. Our family that was broken is healing." "And getting bigger," Sophie added, holding up the finished letter proudly. "Can we mail it tonight, please?" The 3 of them drove to the post office, together, Sophie insisting on placing the letter in the mailbox herself. As she dropped it through the slot, she made them all cross their hearts and hope that it would reach Michael safely. On the drive to the hospital, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, clutching the small peace rose plant they'd bought for Isabella's window. Gerald looked back at her, then at Alexander. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about Stone Enterprises, about the legacy I wanted to preserve so desperately that I was willing to sacrifice everything else." Alexander kept his eyes on the road, but he was listening intently. "Maybe it's time for a different kind of legacy," Gerald continued. "One that's not just about profit margins and market share. What if we created a foundation? Something focused on keeping families together, supporting single parents, helping children get the education they deserve." The idea resonated with something Alexander had been considering himself. "The Stone Family Foundation," he mused, "supporting the growth of families just like Grandma's garden." Sophie's sleepy voice chimed in from the back seat. "Where every flower gets a chance to bloom," Gerald chuckled. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said, but his eyes were bright with possibility. They arrived at the hospital to find Isabella awake and alert, her room filled with the soft glow of sunset. Sophie carefully placed the peace rose on the windowsill, explaining in detail how they would plant it in the garden once Isabella came home. "And we wrote a letter to Uncle Michael," she announced proudly. "I told him about the stars in my room and Grandma's flowers." Isabella smiled, reaching out to stroke Sophie's hair. "You're building bridges, mi amor, between past and present, between hurt and healing." Alexander watched his daughter lean into her mother's touch, saw how Gerald pulled up a chair to join their circle, and felt something settle in his heart. This was what success really looked like, not the cold statistics of quarterly reports or the impressive facades of corporate towers, but the warm reality of family coming together. The peace rose caught the last rays of sunlight, its pale petals glowing like promises waiting to bloom. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, board meetings to face, treatments to undergo, uncertainties to navigate. But tonight, in this room, the future felt as full of possibility as a garden in spring. "Tell me more about the letter," Isabella requested, and Sophie launched into a detailed description, complete with illustrations in the air with her hands. Gerald added his own perspectives, and Alexander simply listened, treasuring the moment. Sometimes the greatest adventures didn't involve traveling far at all. Sometimes they were about finding your way back home, about tending the garden of family with patience and love, about believing that even the deepest roots could be nourished back to life. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of the Stone family kitchen as Alexander prepared breakfast. He had surprised himself by taking to cooking, simple things at first, but growing more adventurous as Sophie's enthusiastic reviews encouraged him. Today's challenge was French toast, a weekend tradition they had started together. "Is the mail here yet?" Sophie asked for the third time that morning, practically bouncing in her seat at the breakfast counter. 2 weeks had passed since they had sent the letter to Michael, and Sophie checked the mailbox religiously every day. "Not yet, sweetheart," Alexander replied, flipping a piece of bread in the pan. "But the mail usually comes around 10, remember?" The sound of the front door opening made them both turn. Gerald entered the kitchen, holding a stack of envelopes and trying to appear casual, though Alexander could see the tension in his father's shoulders. "Anything?" Sophie asked hopefully. Gerald began sorting through the mail slowly. "Bill, advertisement, business letter." He paused, his hands trembling slightly as he held up a cream-colored envelope. "This one's from Arizona." The kitchen fell silent except for the sizzling of French toast in the pan. Alexander quickly moved the pan off the heat and turned to his father, who seemed frozen in place. "Should we open it?" Sophie asked, her voice small but determined. Gerald looked at Alexander, uncertainty clear in his eyes. "What if he doesn't want anything to do with us? What if he does?" Alexander interrupted gently. "What if, like us, he's been waiting for a chance to heal?" Sophie slid off her chair and walked to Gerald, taking his free hand in hers. "Grandpa, remember what you told me about the lilacs? Sometimes you have to be brave and plant them even when you're not sure they'll grow." Gerald squeezed her hand, then carefully opened the envelope. His hands shook so much that Alexander gently took the letter from him and began to read aloud. "Dear Dad, Alexander and Sophie, your letter arrived like a stone dropped in still water, creating ripples that have taken me days to process. I've started this response a dozen times trying to find the right words. I remember the garden. Mom, Maria, used to tell me stories about it, about the woman who taught her to grow roses and love unconditionally. She kept those memories alive for me, even as she protected me from what she saw as a world that had rejected us. She's sitting beside me as I write this. We've spent the last week talking about the past, about choices made from fear and pride, about the possibility of new beginnings. Your letter, especially Sophie's part, touched something in both of us that we thought had hardened over time. I teach literature at Sonoran Community College. Every day, I tell my students about the power of stories to bridge divides and heal wounds. Maybe it's time I lived that lesson. We would like to meet you, all of you. Mum suggests neutral ground, perhaps the botanical gardens in Phoenix. It seems fitting given our family's history with gardens. I have a family of my own. My wife, Sarah, and our 2 children, Emma and Daniel, ages 10 and 7. They're curious about their extended family, especially after Sophie's delightful drawing of the lilacs. I can't promise immediate forgiveness or instant family harmony, but I can promise honesty, openness, and a willingness to grow something new from the roots of the past. Your letter mentioned Isabella's condition. I'm sorry you're facing this challenge. If you're open to it, Sarah is actually a neurological researcher at the University of Arizona. She's offered to review Isabella's case and suggest any experimental treatments that might be available. Let us know if the botanical gardens would work for you. We're free most weekends. Looking forward to writing a new chapter together, Michael and Maria. The kitchen was silent as Alexander finished reading. Gerald had sunk into a chair, tears flowing freely down his face. Sophie had climbed into his lap, her small arms wrapped around his neck in comfort. "They want to meet us," she whispered. "And Emma and Daniel are just like me. They want to know their family too." Alexander looked at the letter again, his mind already racing with possibilities. Sarah's offer to review Isabella's case felt like a gift from the universe, a thread of hope they hadn't expected. "The botanical gardens," Gerald said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Of course it would be the botanical gardens. Maria always loved them. We had our first date there, did you know that, before my family—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Then we'll go," Alexander said decisively. "We'll take Isabella's doctor's reports for Sarah to review. We'll bring pictures of the garden, show them how we're bringing it back to life. We'll—" The smoke alarm's shrill beep interrupted his planning. The forgotten French toast had started smoking on the stove. As Alexander rushed to deal with the minor crisis, Sophie's giggle broke the emotional tension. Soon they were all laughing, at the burned breakfast, at the overwhelming emotions, at the sheer improbability of how their lives had changed in just a few weeks. "I'll make fresh ones," Alexander promised, opening windows to clear the smoke. "Can we make extra?" Sophie asked. "To take to Mommy. She'll want to hear about the letter too." Gerald stood up, wiping his eyes. "I'll help. It's about time I learned how to cook something besides business deals." As they worked together to prepare a new batch of French toast, the letter sat on the counter like a bridge between past and future, between hurt and hope, between what was lost and what could still be found. The week leading up to their Phoenix trip was a whirlwind of activity at the Stone House. Sophie had appointed herself chief family historian, creating a scrapbook filled with photos of their garden's progress, drawings of the house, and carefully pressed lilac blooms. "Do you think Emma and Daniel will like it?" she asked, meticulously gluing another photograph into place. This one showed Alexander and Gerald working together to build a treehouse platform in the old oak tree. "They'll love it," Isabella assured her from her new position by the window. The hospital had finally agreed to in-home care, allowing her to be part of these precious family moments. The peace rose they had planted outside her window was already sprouting new buds. Alexander watched them from the doorway, his heart full. Having Isabella home, even with all the medical equipment and round-the-clock nurses, had brought a new dimension of healing to their family. Sophie spent hours by her mother's side, sharing stories about school, her new friends, and her growing garden expertise. "The board meeting is tomorrow," Gerald said quietly, joining Alexander at the door. "Are you ready?" Alexander nodded. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, restructuring Stone Enterprises to reflect their new priorities. The Stone Family Foundation would become a major focus, with significant resources dedicated to family support programs and educational initiatives. "Some of the old guard won't like it," Alexander acknowledged. "Change never comes easily." "No," Gerald agreed, watching Sophie show Isabella another page of her scrapbook, "but sometimes it comes exactly when it's needed." The poor. Next morning, Alexander stood before the Stone Enterprises board, his father beside him. The presentation screen behind them showed not profit margins or market projections, but images of families, gardens, and community projects. "Stone Enterprises has always been about building legacies," Alexander began. "Today, we're expanding our definition of what that means." To their surprise, the resistance they expected didn't materialize. Instead, many board members shared their own stories of family sacrifices made in the name of corporate success. By the end of the meeting, the Stone Family Foundation had unanimous approval and additional pledges of support. "Maybe the world is ready for a different kind of success story," Gerald mused as they left the boardroom. That evening, as they packed for their Phoenix trip, Sophie insisted on reviewing their family homework one more time. She had created a list of important things they needed to remember about each other. "Emma likes soccer and science," she read from her notebook. "Daniel collects rocks and wants to be a veterinarian. Aunt Sarah studies brains and might be able to help Mommy. Uncle Michael teaches books and poetry. And what about great-grandma Maria? Alexander prompted gently. Sophie's face lit up. She loves gardens too, and she kept all the memories safe for Uncle Michael, just like Mommy kept them safe for me. The doorbell rang, interrupting their review session. It was a delivery from the local nursery, a collection of carefully potted plants native to Arizona, each one chosen with purpose. A peace offering, Gerald explained, showing them the card he had written. For Maria's garden in Phoenix. Alexander helped his father carry the plants to the car they would take to the airport tomorrow. Each pot was labeled with care instructions and a note about its significance. Desert sage for wisdom, butterfly, weed for new beginnings, scarlet penstemon for family bonds. Back inside, they found Isabella helping Sophie pack her special outfit for the meeting, a dress patterned with tiny flowers that Mrs. Chen had helped her choose. The sight of them together, Isabella's hands shaking slightly as she smoothed the fabric, made Alexander's throat tight with emotion. "I wish you could come with us," Sophie said, hugging her mother carefully around all the tubes and monitors. "I'll be there in spirit, mi amor," Isabella assured her. "And thanks to all these machines, I can watch you on video chat the whole time. You can show me the botanical gardens, and Emma and Daniel and everything." Later that night, after Sophie had finally gone to bed, Alexander sat with Isabella, in the peaceful quiet of her room. The medical equipment hummed softly in the background, a sound they had all learned to live with. "Sarah's research," Isabella said softly. "Do you think?" "I think we have to hope," Alexander replied, taking her hand. "Everything else that seemed impossible has found a way to work out. Why not this too?" Isabella smiled, looking out at the moonlit garden. "Life finds a way," she quoted. "Through concrete, through fear, through years of silence, it always finds a way to bloom." Alexander followed her gaze to where the Peace Rose stood sentinel outside her window. Tomorrow, they would board a plane to meet the other. Half of their family, carrying with them pots of healing plants and hearts full of hope. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for now, in this quiet moment, watching the stars emerge above their flourishing garden, everything felt possible. The Phoenix Botanical Gardens sprawled before them, a masterpiece of desert landscaping, where cacti and desert flowers created an otherworldly landscape under the bright Arizona sun. Alexander adjusted Sophie's sun hat as they walked from the parking lot, while Gerald carefully balanced the container of gift plants. "There they are," Sophie whispered, clutching her scrapbook tighter. Near the garden entrance, a group of people waited. A tall man with Gerald's jawline and Alexander's dark hair stood beside a petite woman with silver-streaked black hair. Two children fidgeted nearby, the girl tall and athletic-looking, the boy clutching a small rock collection bag. Time seemed to stop as the two groups faced each other. 40 years of separation stretched between them like an invisible canyon. Sophie, as usual, was the one to bridge the gap. She walked straight up to the children, her natural confidence carrying her forward. "Hi, I'm Sophie. Do you want to see my scrapbook? It has pictures of our garden and pressed flowers and everything." Emma and Daniel looked to their father, who nodded encouragingly. Soon the three children were sitting on a nearby bench, heads bent over Sophie's book, their chatter breaking the tension. "Michael," Gerald said, his voice rough with emotion. "Maria." Maria stepped forward first, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Gerald, you look like your father now, but softer somehow." "Life has a way of softening the hard edges," Gerald replied, "especially when you realize how much those edges have cost you." Michael watched this exchange with a complex expression, his arm around a woman who could only be Sarah. She had the focused, intelligent look of a researcher, but her eyes were kind as she observed the family reunion. "The gardens haven't changed much," Maria said, looking around. "I still remember that first date. You were so nervous you knocked over a potted cactus." Gerald laughed, the sound surprisingly young. "And you were so busy helping me clean up the mess that you forgot to be intimidated by my family name." "We brought something," Alexander interjected, gesturing to the plants Gerald held. "Dad picked them out, desert plants for your garden." Michael stepped forward to examine them, his expression softening as he read the cards explaining each plant's significance. "You remembered," he said to Gerald. "Mom always said you understood the language of gardens." "I tried to forget," Gerald admitted. "Like I tried to forget so many things, but some knowledge lives in the heart, not the head." Sarah moved forward then, her professional demeanor gentling. "Isabella's medical files arrived yesterday. I've already consulted with some colleagues about experimental treatments we're developing. There's one in particular that shows promise for cases like hers." Alexander felt hope flutter in his chest. "Really?" "It's still in trials," Sarah cautioned. "But my team has seen remarkable results. If Isabella qualifies, we could begin treatment within weeks." From the bench, they could hear Sophie explaining to her cousins about the peace rose they'd planted for her mother. Emma was teaching her a clapping game, while Daniel showed her his favorite rocks. "They don't carry our burdens," Maria observed, watching the children. "They just see family." "Speaking of family," Michael said, reaching into his messenger, "perhaps we brought something too." He pulled out a worn photo album. "Mum saved everything. Every newspaper clipping about Stone Enterprises. Every mention of Alexander's achievements. We may have been separated, but we were never disconnected." Gerald's hands shook as he accepted the album. Inside were decades of history, not just news clippings, but birthday cards never sent, school photos kept safe, letters written but never mailed. "I used to imagine running into you," Michael continued. "At academic conferences, business events, I'd rehearse what I'd say. But now that we're here," he gestured helplessly. "Now we start again," Alexander finished. "Not from where we left off, too much has happened, but from where we are now, with who we are now." Sarah checked her phone. "Isabella should be awake. Should we call her? Let her join us virtually for the garden tour?" Alexander nodded gratefully, already pulling up the video chat. Isabella's face appeared on the screen, tired but smiling. She was propped up in her bed, the peace rose visible through the window behind her. "Mi familia," she said softly, taking in the gathered group. "All of you." They began their tour of the gardens, 3 generations walking together through the desert blooms. The children ran ahead, Sophie pointing out different flowers she recognized, Emma and Daniel sharing their knowledge of desert plants. Gerald and Maria walked slowly behind them, sharing stories of the past, filling in the gaps of 40 years. Michael and Sarah talked with Alexander about Isabella's treatment options, their medical expertise mixing with genuine family concern. And through it all, Isabella watched through the phone screen, her presence a reminder of why they had all come together, because love, like the desert flowers around them, could survive the harshest conditions and still find ways to bloom. The evening sun painted the desert sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple as the extended Stone family gathered at Michael and Sarah's home. The spacious adobe house, with its wraparound veranda and carefully tended desert garden, reflected the merging of Maria's Mexican heritage with their Arizona life. Sophie, Emma, and Daniel had disappeared into the backyard, their laughter floating through the open windows as they explored the elaborate rock garden Daniel had created with his collection. The adults sat around the kitchen table sharing coffee and the pan dulce Maria had baked that morning. "The treatment protocol," Sarah explained, spreading medical documents across the table, "involves a combination of traditional immunotherapy and a new approach we've been developing. We've seen remarkable success in similar cases." Alexander studied the papers, hope warring with caution in his heart. "And the risks?" "Present, but manageable," Sarah replied honestly. "The bigger risk would be doing nothing. I've already spoken with Isabella's current medical team. They agree this could be her best chance." "The logistics will be complicated," Michael added. "The treatment requires regular sessions here in Phoenix, specialized care." "I'll handle everything," Alexander said firmly. "Whatever it takes. We can rent a house here, arrange for transportation." "No need," Maria interrupted. "We have the casita out back. It's fully equipped for medical care. We renovated it last year when my mother was ill. It's yours for as long as you need." Gerald, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Stone Enterprises has a corporate jet. It can be at your disposal for transfers, medical equipment, whatever's needed. It's the least we can do." The sound of children's laughter grew louder as Sophie led her cousins inside, their hands full of carefully chosen rocks. "Look what Daniel gave me," she exclaimed, showing Alexander a piece of rose quartz. "It's pink, like the peace rose." "For Aunt Isabella," Daniel explained shyly. "Because rose quartz means healing and love. That's what Dad teaches us in his literature classes, and about symbols and meanings." Alexander felt his throat tighten with emotion. These children, meeting for the first time, were already weaving their lives together with such natural ease. "We should take a family photo," Emma suggested, "for the scrapbook, and for Aunt Isabella to see." They gathered in the garden, positioning the phone so Isabella could watch from her hospital bed. The desert sunset provided a perfect backdrop as they arranged themselves. 3 generations of stones, once divided but now reuniting. "Wait!" Sophie called out, running to collect some flowers from Maria's garden. She returned with a handful of blooms, distributing them among everyone. "Because we're all part of the same garden now." As they posed for the photo, Alexander felt Sophie's small hand slip into his. Through the phone screen, he could see Isabella wiping tears from her eyes as she watched their family moment. "Isabella," Sarah said, addressing the phone directly, "I know we've just met, but I want you to know you're not just getting treatment here. You're getting family. We'll all be here supporting you every step of the way." "Gracias," Isabella replied softly. "All of this, it feels like a dream." "Not a dream," Gerald said. "A new reality. One we should have created long ago." Maria touched his arm gently. "The past is past, Gerald. What matters is now, the future we choose to grow together." After the photo, the children insisted on giving Isabella a virtual tour of the house and garden. They showed her Daniel's rock collection, Emma's soccer, trophies, and the small greenhouse where Maria grew herbs and flowers. Through it all, Isabella's face glowed with joy, even through her obvious fatigue. As the evening drew to a close, plans were made. Sarah would begin the process of adding Isabella to the treatment program. Maria and Gerald would work together to prepare the casita. Michael offered to help Alexander navigate the local medical system and school options for Sophie. "It's not going to be easy," Sarah cautioned as they prepared to leave. "The treatment is demanding and success isn't guaranteed." "But she won't be fighting alone," Michael added. "Not anymore." Sophie hugged her cousins goodbye, extracting promises to help her create a new scrapbook documenting their Arizona adventures. She had already started planning how to decorate her room in the casita, talking excitedly about desert-themed star patterns for the ceiling. As they drove back to their hotel, Sophie sleepy but content in the back seat, Gerald turned to Alexander. "You?" "No," he said thoughtfully. "When I first built Stone Enterprises, I thought I was creating a legacy. But sitting there tonight, watching those children share their treasures, seeing how naturally they accept each other, that's the real legacy. That's what we should have been building all along." Alexander nodded, thinking of the family photo they had taken, of Isabella's joy at seeing them all together, of the hope in Sarah's treatment plans. Sometimes the strongest foundations weren't built of stone and steel, but of love and forgiveness, of second chances and new beginnings. The desert stars emerged above them, bright and clear in the Arizona sky, each one a point of light guiding them home. The casita transformed over the next few weeks into a perfect blend of medical facility and home. Maria's expert touch with interior design made the medical equipment feel less intrusive, while Sarah's knowledge ensured everything was perfectly positioned for both comfort and care. Sophie had been given free rein to decorate her own room, resulting in a delightful mix of desert themes and her beloved stars. "The ceiling constellations are different here," she explained to Isabella, who was finally settling into her new space. "Uncle Michael helped me research the ones we can see best in Arizona. And look, Mommy, we made the Peace Rose constellation." Indeed, some of the glow-in-the-dark stars had been arranged in the shape of a blooming rose, a creative addition to the traditional patterns. Isabella smiled from her bed, already looking more comfortable in the warm Arizona environment. "It's beautiful, mi amor," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. The initial rounds of Sarah's experimental treatment had been grueling, but there were already small signs of improvement. Alexander watched from the doorway as Sophie continued her tour, pointing out every special detail she and her cousins had added to make the space feel like home. Emma's soccer pennant hung beside Sophie's garden drawings. Daniel had contributed a carefully curated selection of desert rocks for the windowsill. The first official results came in, Sarah said quietly, joining Alexander at the door. The tumor's response to the treatment is, well, see for yourself. She handed him a tablet displaying before and after scans. Alexander's heart leaped as he studied the images. Even to his untrained eye, the difference was noticeable. "This is really happening?" he asked, hardly daring to believe. Sarah nodded, her professional demeanor softening into a smile. "It's early days yet, but yes, the combination therapy is working exactly as we hoped. Isabella's body is responding remarkably well." The sound of a car pulling up outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Gerald and Maria returning from their morning garden project. The two had found unexpected common ground in creating a desert-adapted version of the old stone family garden. "The desert primrose is blooming," Sophie announced excitedly, running to the window. "Grandpa said it almost never blooms this early." "Sometimes," Maria said, entering with a small bouquet of the delicate flowers, "plants just need the right conditions to thrive, like people." Gerald followed her in, his usually immaculate business attire replaced by casual clothes marked with dirt from gardening. The change in him over the past weeks had been remarkable. The corporate titan was still there, but tempered now by something softer, more human. "The board approved everything," he announced. "The Stone Family Foundation's first major project will be a network of support centers for families dealing with medical challenges. Sarah, your research team will have full funding for expanding the treatment program." Michael arrived next, carrying a stack of papers. "My department approved my sabbatical request," he said. "I'll be writing a book about family reconciliation and healing, using literature as a lens to explore personal transformation." "Using us as case studies?" Alexander asked, amused. "With names changed to protect the innocent and the formerly stubborn," Michael replied with a grin. The house filled with the comfortable chaos of family as Emma and Daniel arrived from school, eager to share their day's adventures. Mrs. Chen, who had insisted on coming to Arizona to help, was teaching Maria her secret recipe for soup while they discussed the benefits of various healing herbs. "It's a lot of change," Alexander said softly to Isabella as they watched their extended family interact. "Are you sure you're okay with all of this?" Isabella reached for his hand, her grip stronger than it had been in months. "Change brought us here," she reminded him. "Change brought our family together. And now change is giving us a future we never thought possible." Sophie had gathered her cousins to work on the family scrapbook, which had grown to include pressed desert flowers alongside the lilac blooms from home. They were creating a timeline of the family's story, complete with illustrations and carefully labeled photographs. "Look," Sophie called out, holding up her latest drawing. "I drew our two gardens growing together." The picture showed two distinct gardens, the lush greenery of the Stone family home and the vibrant desert landscape of their Arizona sanctuary, connected by a path of blooming flowers. It was childlike in its execution but profound in its symbolism. "That's exactly right," Gerald said, studying the drawing. "Two different types of beauty, two different ways of growing, but part of the same family story." Sarah checked Isabella's monitors, nodding with satisfaction at the readings. "Everything's stable," she reported. "The next round of treatment is scheduled for tomorrow, but for now," she gestured at the family gathered in the room, "this is the best medicine." Through the window, the desert sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, while the garden Gerald and Maria had planted caught the light like jewels. Inside, the sounds of family, laughter, conversation, the quiet murmur of shared stories filled the space with warmth. Changes were still coming. Challenges remained ahead. But in this moment, watching Sophie teach her cousins how to press dessert flowers while Gerald and Maria planned tomorrow's gardening projects, Alexander knew they would face whatever came next together as family. The Arizona autumn brought subtle changes to the desert landscape. While not as dramatic as the seasonal shifts back at the Stone family home, there was a softening to the light, a gentle cooling in the air that made the garden come alive in new ways. In the casita's comfortable living room, Isabella sat in a reclining chair by the window, a major improvement from being confined to bed. Her latest scan results were displayed on the coffee table, each image showing continued improvement that seemed almost miraculous. "The treatment protocol is exceeding all our expectations," Sarah explained to the gathered family. "The tumor has reduced by 60%, and your body's natural immune response is stronger than ever." "Strong enough to go outside?" Sophie asked hopefully. She had been dreaming of showing her mother the garden she'd helped create with her grandparents. Sarah exchanged glances with the primary care nurse, who nodded. "A short visit to the garden should be fine, as long as we take precautions." The joy on Sophie's face was matched by Isabella's own delight as they carefully helped her into a wheelchair. It was her first time outside since beginning the treatment, and the Arizona sun felt like a blessing on her skin. "Show me everything," she said to Sophie, who took the responsibility of garden tour guide very seriously. "These are the desert primrose that bloomed early," Sophie began, pointing out each plant with expertise. "And here's where Daniel helped me make a special rock garden for my crystal collection. Emma says the rocks help protect the plant's roots from the hot sun." As Sophie continued her tour, Alexander noticed his father and Maria sitting together on a garden bench, deep in conversation. Their relationship had evolved into something unexpected, not a rekindling of old romance, but a deep friendship built on shared history and understanding. "I've been thinking," Gerald was saying, "about the house in Phoenix where we first met. It's still there, you know, I checked." Maria nodded. "The Meyer family still owns it. Rosa Meyer was my best friend's mother. She gave me that job as a housekeeper that led to meeting you." "It's for sale now," Gerald continued. "I thought perhaps the foundation could buy it, turn it into one of our family support centers, a place where other families can find their way back to each other." Michael, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop while pruning nearby plants, joined the conversation. That's actually perfect. A place where the past can help heal the future." The sound of children's laughter drew their attention to where Sophie was showing Emma and Daniel how to transplant some small cacti Sarah had brought from the university's Botanical Research Center. Each child wore carefully padded gloves, following Sophie's surprisingly expert instructions. "You've created quite the gardener there," Maria said to Alexander, who had joined them on the bench. "She has a natural gift for helping things grow." "She helps people grow too," Michael added. "The way she brought our families together, sometimes it takes a child's wisdom to show adults the way." Isabella's voice carried across the garden. "Has she identified various herbs in Maria's medicinal garden section?" Her knowledge of traditional healing plants matched perfectly with Sarah's scientific understanding, creating a bridge between old wisdom and new medicine. "The Foundation's first center will have a garden like this," Gerald announced. "A place where different kinds of healing can come together." The family gathered for lunch on the casita's patio, an increasingly common tradition. Mrs. Chen and Maria had collaborated on a menu that blended their culinary traditions, creating something new and wonderful. The children set the table, while the adults arranged chairs to ensure Isabella had the perfect balance of sun and shade. "I have news," Michael said once everyone was seated. "The university press is interested in my book. They think it could help other families facing similar challenges." "As long as you change our names," Emma insisted with a grin. "I want to be called Princess Gardner in the book." "Speaking of names," Gerald added, "the board approved the official name for our first family center, the Peace Rose Center for Family Healing." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Like Mommy's rose, the one that's still blooming back home." Mrs. Chen sent me pictures this morning, Alexander said, pulling out his phone to show recent photos of their garden back east. The peace rose had indeed flourished, spreading and blooming as if determined to match Isabella's improving health. "Two gardens," Sophie said contentedly, looking around at her family. "Two homes, twice as much love." Isabella reached for her daughter's hand, her grip stronger each day. "And one family," she added, "finally whole." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the desert garden, while inside the casita, Sarah prepared for Isabella's next treatment session. Life had found a new rhythm here. Medical treatments balanced with family meals, therapy sessions followed by gardening lessons, scientific discussions flowing into storytelling evenings. They were growing together, this unexpectedly extended family, each person contributing their own unique gifts to the whole. Like the desert plants in their garden, they had learned to thrive in unlikely conditions, to find strength in their roots, and to bloom in their own perfect time. 6 months had passed since their move to Arizona, and the desert winter had brought its own kind of magic to their lives. The morning air was crisp as Alexander helped Isabella take her now regular walk through the garden. Her strength had returned enough that she only needed his arm for balance, a fact that still filled him with quiet joy. "Sarah wants to present your case at the International Medical Conference," he told her as they paused to admire the winter-blooming aloes. "She says your recovery could help revolutionize treatment protocols for similar conditions." Isabella smiled, reaching out to touch a bright orange bloom. From a chance meeting in a cemetery to changing medical science, life has strange ways of weaving its stories, doesn't it? Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sophie, Emma, and Daniel, racing through the garden with excitement. "They're here," Sophie called out. "The signs for the Peace Rose Center just arrived." Indeed, a delivery truck was pulling up to the renovated Meyer house, now transformed into the first of what would become a network of family support centers. The children had been instrumental in its design, insisting on plenty of garden spaces and cozy corners where families could come together to heal. "Should we go see?" Alexander asked Isabella, who nodded eagerly. The short drive to the center revealed Gerald and Maria already there, directing the installation of the elegant sign that would mark this new beginning. The Peace Rose logo, designed by Sophie and professionally rendered, incorporated elements from both their gardens, eastern roses and desert blooms intertwined. Michael and Sarah arrived moments later, carrying boxes of books and medical information, pamphlets. The center would offer both practical support and emotional guidance, with Michael leading writing therapy sessions while Sarah coordinated with medical facilities. "The first families arrive next week," Michael announced as they gathered, in the center's main room. 3 of them are already scheduled for consultations about the new treatment protocol. "And 2 more have signed up for the family reconciliation program," Gerald added, his voice warm with pride. The program had been his idea, a way to help other families bridge the kinds of gaps that had once separated their own. Sophie led her cousins through the building, showing off the children's area they had helped design. It featured a wall-sized mural of a garden that children could add to with their own artwork, creating a growing testament to hope and healing. "Remember when we first met?" Emma asked Sophie as they added paper flowers to the mural. "You showed us your scrapbook, and now we're making a giant one on the wall." "Speaking of the scrapbook," Isabella said, "I think it's time for a new edition." She pulled out her phone to show them the latest scan results. The tumor had shrunk to a barely visible shadow. "Sarah says 1 more treatment cycle should be enough." The news was met with joyful tears and tight hugs. Mrs. Chen, who had been arranging refreshments for the center's upcoming open house, brought out a special cake she had been saving for just such an occasion. As they celebrated, Gerald drew Alexander aside. "There's something else," he said, handing over a folder. "The investigators found more information about your brother, my first son. Gerald's voice caught. "He became a doctor, specialized in family trauma counseling before he passed away 5 years ago." Alexander felt the weight of this revelation. He was helping families heal just like we're doing now. His work laid some of the groundwork for the therapy programs we're implementing here, Gerald continued. Maria knew, but she waited until we were ready to handle the truth. His legacy lives on in this center, even if he never knew his connection to us. The sound of children's laughter mixed with the gentle splash of the center's courtyard fountain. Through the windows, they could see the garden where Maria had recreated elements from both their past and present, roses and desert plants growing side by side, proving that love, like nature, could adapt and flourish in any environment. "We should plant something in his honor," Alexander suggested. "What was his favorite flower?" "Sunflowers," Maria answered, joining them. "He grew them everywhere, said they always turned their faces to the light, no matter how dark the day." Sophie, overhearing this, immediately began planning a sunflower section for the center's garden. "They'll be like guardians," she declared, "watching over all the families who come here to heal." Isabella made her way to the center's back porch, where comfortable seating allowed visitors to enjoy the garden view. Her strength had grown so much that she managed the short walk without assistance. "I never thought," she said as Alexander joined her, "when I sent Sophie to find you that day, that we would end up here, creating something so much bigger than ourselves." The winter sun cast long shadows across the garden, but the air was warm with promise. In the distance, they could see the mountains that had witnessed their family's transformation, their purple peaks a reminder of the majesty of change. "Sometimes the best gardens grow from the smallest seeds," Alexander replied, watching Sophie. "Teach her cousins how to properly plant sunflower seeds in the new memorial garden. And the strongest flowers bloom not in spite of their challenges, but because of them."